and had a fun time talking to other folks. Going to change the picture on it. Going to change the title of it later because I scheduled it for earlier than you could make it. But I wanted to schedule something, and then people showed up, had a good time.
Okay.
But I'll take care of the misadvertisement after this.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So let's see. Last time we spoke, what did we speak of, or did we want to continue, or did you want a topic change, or?
I think we kind of just talked about, I guess, ways to predict the supernatural. We kind of mentioned a little bit about psychics and stuff.
How about just experience of supernatural for a topic? Is that cool?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just open it up, make it more general, and that way it can just be natural and just move as it moves. Is that cool?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. You feel comfortable?
Yeah.
You're ready to go live then?
Everything all set up, yeah.
Yeah, you sound good. Picture's good.
Cool.
You ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's a
great.
new mic, so if I'm a little too quiet or anything, let me know.
Actually, it's a little bit loud in my opinion. Okay.
Any better?
All right. Yeah, it's not quite so shocking.
Okay.
Okay. All right, cool. We're going to go live now. 1, 2, 3. Welcome to Demolish Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religion. Peace and respect to you all. Tonight we have, as promised, although I thought it might be earlier and I misscheduled, and I'll be taking care of that after this show. Please welcome The Snake Was Right. Snake Was Right. Would you like to talk a little bit about yourself? Tell the people about yourself if they don't already know, and for future viewers.
Well, I am studying microbiology right now, and most of my channel activity recently has been like against creationism and stuff. So
against creationism, that's interesting.
Yeah. I think it's just because I'm really interested in biology, and that's kind of and I'm really interested in theology too. And that's kind of where biology and theology intersect, is a lot of the creationist arguments there. But yeah, like I said, I'm also really interested in theology. I went to Catholic school, so I'm pretty well versed, at least in the Catholic type of stuff. Yeah, and I don't know. I've been debating a lot lately in my own head. I might be changing my channel name a little bit here soon to Snake of Light, just for various reasons. Yeah, debating the pros and cons of that. So that's where I'm at right now.
Right on. Okay. Yeah, I've been wanting to have a deeper discussion with you as to how the snake was right. Okay. And I guess this might be my last chance if you're changing your channel name.
Well, it would still be a reference to that, just a little bit different, in the sense of like the light being the Enlightenment, and I was talking to some other biblical apologists, and they were telling me how the word for the cunning snake used in Genesis was actually something akin to calling it shining, which has many connections to like spirituality, I guess including like Stephen King's Shining. Like that's kind of a, just a way of spiritual connection. So
yeah, when you get into the
more, I don't want to like go around declaring that I'm always right or something like that. But,
that's funny. Yeah, I hope that no one thinks that they must be right.
Yeah.
I hope not. I certainly don't think that I must be right, even though I am convinced of it. I'm willing to accept argumentation against my view. If it can be disproven, I'd like to hear about it. And doing some pretty serious things in that testing arena. Yeah, the way I understand it, and this is not true in a doctrinal view of any church that I know of, but is, disclaimer, no church is going to agree with me. Um, that the death that's being referred to, okay, so there's two kinds of death referred to in the Christian text. And Christians believe that the second death is separation from God, but the spirit lives forever in torment, separated from God. So I don't know where the word death fits in right there. But the way I see it, the second death would be the death of the flesh, which of course happens historically to absolutely everyone I've ever heard of eventually. But the first death would be the death of materialism. So if I look at it with that context, if the snake said, "Thou shalt surely not die," that's the King James version. If that's what it said, then, or the serpent is more accurate, not snake so much. But if it said, "Thou shalt surely not die," it would have been referring to the first or the second death, the death of flesh. Whereas in the original quote, "If thou eat it, surely thou shalt die," would be referring to the first death. That is, if you gain knowledge of good and evil, you would have a death of your materialism, your assignment of value only to the physical, is what that would be saying. So it's the what's that fallacy called, where two words sound the same, or they have different meanings? You're using them differently, kind of a bait and switch. I don't know the name of that fallacy.
Is that maybe equivocation?
Yeah, I think that's it. It's an equivocation fallacy that they're using the same word two different ways, and that is where the subtlety of the trick lies. Mm-hmm. Lies. There's another word that sounds that the snake was not forthcoming. Not that it told a lie; it just didn't make it clear what it meant.
I mean, my interpretation is that it. I guess it would be correct in both senses of the words. The way I interpret it is God said, "Surely you shall die this day," and I guess either one, or if you take both meanings, I suppose I guess it would be wrong if you didn't have that spiritual death. Although I mean, I look at it at a different framework as if the knowledge of good and evil would be a spiritual awakening.
Right.
And so I've traditionally seen it more as like a threat that they would die physically.
I think that's part of the problem that I had, is that I was raised in a Christian community and I was raised by Christians. So I almost couldn't look at it differently than what had been told me several times. And I think that's a super difficult thing to do. But if I look into the definitions throughout the text of first and second death, they conform very easily to an idea alignment change being the first death, and then your body failing being the second death. The second death would be standing in a lava flow. Is an example of, and it says, "And this is the second death." That is to say, if you stood in a lava flow, your body would expire. I think that's plainly true. And then if we go all the way back to Genesis, to the first story right after the Garden of Eden, you have Cain and Abel, whose names, Cain means transition and Abel means worldliness, where transition kills worldliness, and it's the first death. So the first story of death in the Bible would be describing the first death. And that's why I look at it the way that I do, not that I think that's an average way to look at it, or that it's agreed upon by scholarship or theologians.
Yeah, I was still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I guess it's not so black and white as good or bad guys, but how Cain's actions are I mean, they're portrayed as bad, and I still can't exactly make that make sense with the fact that one should, like, the lesson that one should remove their worldliness,
right?
Because I think his actions were clearly supposed to be malicious and wrong. He shouldn't have killed Abel.
I mean, I can certainly see that point of view, and that's the way churches teach it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what's being done there is the speaker is speaking to how churches teach it.
So, I mean, if you're looking at it purely as a metaphorical thing, then I could almost see it. But as a story, as the characters themselves, it seems like Cain would be the antagonist, and I don't know. I just don't see.
I still think that's true.
How killing your brother would be something that one should do.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. And correct me if I'm wrong. What you're saying is that one of the brothers was worldly and the other brother was transitioning.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, that's different. I believe that actually the story is describing a singular person and the inner turmoil that all of us go through. I don't think it's describing two different people.
Mm-hmm.
That a person is born into a worldly situation, and we naturally see the physical realm, and we naturally accept it, and that to see a different thing would be the transition.
Okay.
But I think all of us go through that.
And then, but as far as like how Abel was favored by God, how does that work factor in?
Oh, why do you say Abel is favored by God?
I mean, I don't remember exact quotes or anything, but
well, if I could go over the part that that I think you're talking about, and maybe you could disagree or agree.
Sure.
Where Cain makes a sacrifice of grains, and that's not okay, and then Abel makes the sacrifice of sheep, and that is okay. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's
okay.
That's what I was thinking.
All right. So you throughout the text, the word sheep is people. It's not actual animals. That we're the ones called the sheep. That's why you have the sheep, the shepherd, et cetera, like that. So the sacrifice of sheep is the sacrifice of the fleshliness. A sacrifice of grain is like saying a sacrifice of non-living, like money goods. And I could see that as saying, don't give the Catholic Church money. Instead, go devote your time to people. Okay. I could see it. I could see it that way, because money, when you give money, you're not really giving of yourself. Yeah, it hurts you, and maybe you don't live quite as well because you give some of your money away. But there's a big difference between like actually going and helping someone and just like dropping off cash.
Yeah. Wouldn't the money or the grains be more the worldly offering though?
Yes, it is. That's why the fleshly thing is the only thing that's acceptable. It's not talking about killing sheep or killing people, obviously. Okay. That's not what sacrifice is about. Now, a lot of people have taken it that way and actually did it, but that doesn't mean that's what the story's talking about.
I'm just a little confused because
it sounds backwards to our culture. I agree with you.
Well, if Cain was the transitional one, but he's the one offering the worldly offering, and then Abel is the worldly one, but he's offering the spiritual offering.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe explain more about that.
I think you'd have to be Jewish or raised in that culture for that to be easily translatable, but I'll do my best, even though I don't think I'm good at that. Okay. I'll try. Okay. So wherein a European would go, okay, that's exactly backwards, and the names are backwards too. Okay. Okay. But his sacrifice is who he is, if you look at it that way. Like your sacrifice is the real you. I don't know if
Okay.
that helps, or it does. To my brain, that makes sense. Like the sacrifice is not a separate thing from you. The sacrifice is representative of you. So then the Abel is worldliness, and he is a sacrifice of flesh. He sacrifices flesh, which doesn't mean to kill something. But worldliness is fleshliness. If I don't know if that even makes sense to you. I'm sorry if it doesn't. I think that's about the best I can do.
I mean, is it kind of like he's sacrificing his fleshliness or his spiritual connection in order to be worldly?
No, he see it does. It still looks backwards. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't think I could do a better job of it. I would recommend someone I think does a better job of it, although they don't agree with me on all points. They do agree with me on this, and I think he does a much better job of explaining. He has YouTube videos. If you go look into Jordan Peterson, Cain and Abel, he does a much better job of explaining it than I do, and I'm sorry at my failing. If I have an excuse, I'm 7 years old, so I'm not very good at explaining these things all the time, all points.
Okay. But so you kind of agree with his interpretation?
I agree with Jordan Peterson on the interpretation of the exacting story of Cain and Abel.
Okay. I'll check that out.
I agree with him on anything else. I'm not saying that.
Okay.
Okay.
I was just listening to his lecture on it was supposedly, the title said it was about the flood, but he didn't. I don't think he's talked about it much so far. Just talking about chaos and order, the Jordan Peterson staples.
Right.
But I like pretty much everything he's talked about.
I think he's a really intelligent guy.
Yeah. As far as biblical interpretations, I got like a few bones to pick with like his version of truth or God, but overall, I think he's striking as something much more deep than just the events are literal.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be very useful for any purpose.
It's obviously not useful because there are people who are atheists.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not working to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Nor does the crucifix prove anything to anybody, really, unless they want it to.
Yeah.
And there's people who want it to, but it doesn't actually prove anything. Yeah, I think I spoke to you about the Snake Nebula, about where it was located, about how it can be seen from this Earth today using the telescopes that we have, that it would have been hidden there, that it is a great distance away. That is, it fits the description of the serpent. I think, did we talk about that?
I think maybe you mentioned it, but I don't think we did much in depth on what that would represent, I guess.
I think the literal and correct interpretation of the serpent in the Garden of Eden is that at some point the Earth would be able to find the Serpent Nebula. That it is above the plane of our solar system, that it is above the beasts of the field, that it is directly above the cattle, that is above the Taurus constellation, about 20 degrees toward north of that. That it does have great enmity, that means literal distance. It could mean figurative emotional distance, but it can mean literal distance. That it's a really far ways from here, and that it literally does not have legs. There's no appearance of any legs in the used up part or uncumulated part of the Snake Nebula, which makes a dark area where you can see through it and see space on the other side of the nebula. That it is crawling on its belly all the days of its life, eating dust and gas, because dust and gas, well, dust is what a nebula is made of. We're pretty sure that's what a nebula is space dust in an area that's electrified or ionized, is giving off coloration. So I think it fits the description quite perfectly, and I think that's what's actually being referred to. that the woman is tempted by the snake, I think, or by the serpent, is that women are the provocateurs, the motivators of man. I really do believe that most men without women, without a sexual interest, would be hairy and stinky, drinking beer in a cave, basically. that most men would do very much of nothing if it wasn't for someone that they wanted to impress. So I think that one day Eve, that is woman on this earth, pointed at the stars. And man's been investigating ever since she pointed at it. And man maybe wouldn't even have noticed without woman. That part's a joke. But it's that women are definitely the motivator of man. And that is why Eve is tempted by the serpent instead of Adam, because women are the motivator, men are not, in my opinion.
And going the Jordan Peterson route, the women embody the chaotic, the change, and
progress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would you say that kind of maybe the spark of wanting to explore and learn new things about the world is kind of gaining the knowledge of good and evil type of thing?
Would I go as far as to say it's the gaining of knowledge of good and evil? No, but I was right there with you right till you said that part of it. That's exactly what I was trying to say that women do in relationships. I mean, if you find a young couple, and I do this to young couples that I think will allow me, and without being angry at me, I'll ask them a question each, and I'll say, now this is assuming heterosexuality. I'm not trying to be prejudiced. It's just I know more hetero couples than I do anyone else. But anyway, not because I'm selecting them. It just seems by chance that's the way it ends up. I'll ask of the man, is she beautiful? Now you'd think that wouldn't be all that important in a relationship. And I'll ask the woman, is he worth saving? And both of them will smile very big and not answer, which just, I think, really nails it down. Mm-hmm. If a man is in love with a woman, he will think she is beautiful. Everyone else can think she's ugly, doesn't even matter. And a woman can't have a relationship with a man unless she sees values in him that she thinks have potential, or she just won't allow herself to have deep emotional feelings about him. And yes, I believe every woman is part of a home improvement committee. That's what they do, is try to fix their guy. So I think being a man in our culture, you just have to accept that a woman is out to fix you. But at least that means she loves you.
Yeah.
So that's what I think.
They want someone dangerous, but who they can also reform a little bit.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely.
I think that same dynamic, it probably goes across almost any couple to some extent. And
I'm sure it does.
Of course, it crosses over, between the men and women, too. Sure.
I would think it would.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are definitely roles that we play in this stage play of life. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we naturally assume those roles.
Well, and that's one reason it works, is those elements are just kind of, you got to have that balance of chaos and order, and that's the way life works out. It finds its little niche, and if it works, it stays.
Right on. Right on. Okay, so let's see. Where were we at? Refresh me if you would. I think you're better at that than I am.
Well, I can forget pretty easily, but this time I remember. I think we were like what would the spark to explore kind of be? I guess symbolized by in the Genesis story, like what the snake.
What would? Oh, okay. I think it's talking about our natural human tendencies, that we want to accomplish certain things on this planet. And I think that the most important things are easy to see. We want to create a perfect society. Want to. I'm not saying it's happening tomorrow. We want to create a perfect society. We want to end all pain. We want to live forever. We want to travel space. I think all that is pretty assumable. A lot of people say I wouldn't want to live forever, but what they're actually saying is I wouldn't want to see my loved ones die. And if I were getting old, I wouldn't want to just keep getting older. But that's not what genetic perfection would do. Genetic perfection would be you don't get older. You get to a premium age and you kind of stop aging. Something like a lobster or a loggerhead turtle, squid, certain clams. There's a tortoise that lives that way. It doesn't, quote unquote, age. They can stay perfectly healthy, reproducing females into hundreds of years. So, that's not really aging the way we think of aging. I myself witnessed a 630-something, can't remember what the ranger said, year-old loggerhead turtle laying a clutch of eggs on the beach on Bear Island, North Carolina. She's older than the United States.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, there's a laundry list of animals like that on this planet. We're just not one of them right now.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, this Earth has a circumference. You couldn't just let everybody populate as much as they want and let them live forever. That wouldn't really work out.
Yeah, perhaps it's better to keep us a little low until we figure out how to travel the stars.
That's what I'm thinking. Until we have unlimited resources, this is a better scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I was also thinking, like you were saying earlier, is most people at least are motivated to improve and to discover and things like for others, like even if it's just so shallow as to impress and get the girl, or
sure.
if it's you want a better world for your children or something like this.
I don't know how shallow that is. I wouldn't be here without that.
Yeah. But I mean, you shouldn't live to impress others, but that's certainly you shouldn't live without that. You shouldn't go on the other extreme. It's important, I think, at least in developing healthy relationships.
It seems like it should be.
You don't want to be reviled by everyone.
No, I think not. Although I know a few Christians are doing their best to be reviled by everyone. I know a few of them, and it's really saddens my heart. It's disappointing to me, and I consider those positions to be dishonest. But anyway, moving on then. So you said you're going to change your channel to Snake of Light. Is that what you're going to change it to? Is that what you said? Correct me. Yeah,
I'm leaning pretty heavily in that direction, because it contains the whole same message of the current channel name, and it's just a little more neutral, I guess, and a little more mysterious. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Do you think it would be accurate to say that's at least it's plausible? I'm not trying to straw man you or anything. That it's at least plausible that, say, for instance, the fallen angels, the watchers, the creators of the Nephilim, the teachers that taught splicing of plants, making up of eye, making of jewelry, metallurgy, apparently. I think I already mentioned splicing of plants. Did I mention that one? Anyway, yeah. The teachers were there enlightening people. Do you think that's fair to say?
That they existed?
We have to grant that they existed, or there's no conversation. But if they existed, that's what they were doing, was teaching people, and that's a positive thing. but yet
Yeah, I would think
according to Yahweh, they did poorly, they did wrong.
okay. Yeah. I mean, if angels or Nephilim existed, I would assume they were interacting with humans at some level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess that's one reason I don't really buy a lot of, well, any religion, is divine hiddenness. And I think we mentioned that we could touch on that topic in the emails too, so we could go in that direction if you wanted.
Sure, I'd love to. I think that divine hiddenness is a pride problem, and not a pride of God problem, but a pride of the practitioner is the problem. And that when we point out things like divine hiddenness and the problem of evil and the rejection of other gods, that those are emotional pleas, and the Christian is too proud to realize that they're emotional pleas. Instead, they fall for it and they agree to it and become defensive. But again, that's all the problem of pride and the way they're looking at it. It's not by necessity true. So let's talk about divine hiddenness. Let's say that we people of this earth perfected space travel, okay, and we perfected the human genome. There was no longer deterioration of telomeres, and we were perfectly self-replicating, and we were perfectly self-healing. Okay, in other words, in order to hurt a human being, you'd have to pretty much like cut their head off or stab them in the heart, something they could not ever recover from. That it would just be too catastrophic. Okay, so I'm saying eternal being, not an immortal being. That's two different things. Okay, so let's say we did that. We started traveling space and nobody died anymore. Okay, and let's say we went out away from this earth, and let's say that we went toward one of the Goldilocks planets, because in Fraunhofer lines, we see what is essentially a barcode of a cocktail of breathable gases on other planets. That is, we could live there. Okay? So let's say we went to one of those. But as we arrive, we have sensors and high-resolution cameras that can focus, at 10 miles away from outer space. We could look at the surface of the planet. And let's say we looked at the surface of the planet before we landed, and we saw cowboys and Indians.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps we saw the first Homo erectus. Just for argument's sake, that's what we saw there. We'd say, holy crap, Darwinistic evolution worked better than we thought. Okay? And it happened more than one place. And here we are faced with ancient us. Okay, so now you're in a moral dilemma. So what do you think, in your own judgments, will do for this conversation? And which is not to accuse you of being flawed without accusing myself of being flawed. I am too. But just the same, in your measure, if you were the captain of that ship, what might you do and what might you not do?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would do would be to contact other parts of my civilization, I guess, and
fair enough,
have the conversation with them. I definitely wouldn't. First thing I would do would not be to go down and contact any of the civilization, but I would keep my distance. I guess if it was decided that we should go down there, I don't know. That would probably be a group decision. So, but if I was the arbiter of that, I guess I would. I don't know. I might support some kind of almost what people think are the UFOs are doing right now. Maybe sampling covertly, but as I say it, that sounds kind of messed up because, of course. We have a lot of existential angst about possible aliens doing that to us.
Right.
But if I was to do something like that, it would last maybe, I don't know, maybe a year or two.
Okay.
I don't think it would go on for 50, 60 years. partially, I guess, because we would want to move forward on whatever experiments, but partially because of our perspective now is like, how long do you aliens need to keep probing us before you just come out? I think at least if the civilization was sufficiently advanced, they'd catch on pretty quickly, or at least some people would. Some of the conspiracy theorists would, but I don't know.
Okay, so now let's say, for instance, that the Earth that you left behind, that the human beings that had lived there, they had accidentally had some nuclear release. Let's say that they had accidentally severely harmed the ozone. Let's say that they had accidentally released a lot of produced and released a lot of carbon dioxide. Let's say that they had accidentally created nuclear weapons and possibly even set them off by the time you left or shortly after you left. The crew that you were part of left. Let's say that they had accidentally had oil spills in the ocean and were killing off life forms in the oceans. Let's say that they accidentally caused global warming and melted the ice caps. Let's say that they had accidentally changed the salinity of the ocean, plunging the planet into a gigantic ice age where all of the rest of them died who weren't on your spaceship. And now you're looking at another batch of humans that seem to be exactly like we started.
Would that change how I approach the situation?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
You'd let them go through all that?
No.
Let's say, just for argument's sake, that just by some weird happenstance, they don't make a spaceship like yours eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And they just perish.
Well, I would err on the side of, like, at least trying to help rescue them or help them rescue themselves, something like that.
I think that'd be an honorable thing to do. So here you are in a moral dilemma. You don't want to mess them up, but you don't want to leave them to their own vices.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try to find something fairly in between there.
Well,
what's the gentlest thing you think you could do that would help them considerably without just totally messing up their brains?
I don't know.
I mean, obviously, if you just drop down with your spaceship, you're going to freak them out.
Yeah.
That would not be cool.
I think we'd get over it I think they would get over it pretty quickly, though. People would.
No, they'd be okay with it. They'd be okay. I'm not saying they wouldn't be okay with it. I'm saying that would be such a huge paradigm shift they could never go back from it.
Yeah. But I mean, so is our reliance on electricity.
Sure, but electricity is not intelligent and can't make decisions. And it doesn't have morality, but you have morality. You have a moral thing here that you have to address if you're going to act at all.
Like the responsibility of
knowledge.
Contracting like a civilization that is dependent on you.
You could do that.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I would still feel that there's more moral responsibility in lending aid.
I think you're right. There's a lot of moral responsibility in that. Like that might make things worse at the time.
Yeah, but you can't exactly predict everything. I mean,
right. Well,
if you try to help
the history of your planet. If it's safe to say that they're exhibiting aspects of human nature, you recognize human nature and you go, they're acting just like we did in the same time frame, at the same step of development. Then you could extrapolate that out and say, well, they're probably going to do the same things we did. And I think that would be relatively accurate if they apparently are human beings, acting like human beings.
I mean, I guess it depends on the state of the planet, how quickly you would intervene, or what kind of, whether you would study them or come down and save them immediately, like if they were suffering like catastrophic global storms at the time that you found them, or...
So just for the conversation, let's say you discovered them, and extrapolating out with your understanding that you have of what happened on this Earth, you say, oh, it's going to be about 20 to 10 to 20,000 years before they just ruin the planet. And there's no way they'll be able to save it. Say you had 10 or 20,000 years. And by the way, you live forever because your genetics are now perfected. You don't have destruction of your telomeres. You don't have poor replication of your genetic material. So you have infinite time.
I think if we had precedent that intervention would like ruin their civilization, like our real world example, kind of when we intervene in the Middle East, every time the U.S. has tried that, it has backfired and everything has gone totally down the toilet. And obviously that's more aggressive than what we're suggesting, but...
Right. It's wrong because it's so aggressive. I agree with you.
But given that precedent, we would know, let's not... If we try this again, it's probably going to end the same. So if every time we contact a civilization, they advance so quickly that they just blow themselves up in a month or something, I would say probably approach with caution. Probably, maybe try it slower this time, or maybe not at all. But without that kind of precedent, I would always probably urge contact with that civilization. The more the merrier. And yeah, I don't know where exactly where are you going with this?
I'm having you describe religion.
Okay.
That's what I'm doing.
From a God's point of view?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the question of evolution is moot. It's not even on topic. It doesn't really matter how we got here. The only thing I'm saying is there is a possibility that we became fully advanced somewhere not here a really long time ago. That's all that this would need. And if they flew by our planet and saw more of themselves and had some feeling of association and compassion, yet the knowledge of what would be our future, then they might present to us a rescue plan where they pull our butt out of the fire at the last second, and they only give us the lightest fairy tale style stories about it, which aren't even all that believable. I think that's a good solution.
So like, they dropped off a care package and then left or something like that?
Yeah, something pretty similar to one care package to every town, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Something similar to that.
I
think it's a pretty good solution to the moral dilemma. And of course, I don't have perfect morality or understanding, and I don't know what the future holds in any real way, any usable way. But just the same, it seems like it might be a really decent solution.
So like if we came upon some Mayan style civilization or something like that, would we, I don't know, play into their preconceptions that we would be God beings or something like that?
See, that's a really good reason for divine hiddenness now, isn't it?
Not from how I would choose to do things. I would be pretty... Okay. I'm for transparency. I mean, across the board.
Well, I'm for transparency, but I don't think that if my daughter at 4 years old asks me, Dad, where do babies come from, that I'm going to start describing physical relations between males and females. I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tone it down and I'm going to soften it. I'm going to sugarcoat it. And I'm not going to tell her about the mechanics of that sort of thing at all because she's not ready for that.
Yeah. But would you say it was done by a stork?
No, I think I would try to be honest, but gentle and not talk about the mechanics at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what my mom did when I asked her. Something like that. Because I never had a stork story or a cabbage leaf story, anything weird like that. I understood that it involved a female and a male who were interested in each other, in order to produce a child. I understood that much, even before I understood what arousal was or anything. So I remember understanding that.
So, like, I'm imagining C-3PO being the god of the Ewoks,
Exactly.
sort of thing.
I mean, I think that's pretty irresponsible.
Yeah, I think you should try to. I mean, if you're in a pinch like that, like in Star Wars, maybe take advantage of it. But you should try to be as honest and transparent as possible. Like,
I think so. Yeah, I think that's moral.
yeah. Um, and the goal would be to have it as efficient and open communication as possible. I mean, you would have people trying to learn the languages on both sides and things like that, and try to explain, try to I don't know, even open trade, stuff like that. I mean,
I th- I,
if
th- I
you
have to
could
agree
open
with you
up
mostly.
schools, things like that.
I have to agree with you mostly.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm more trying to. I mean, I tried to use your personal morality as an example of what might happen, and I think that you still pretty much, um, pretty much lent to helping without helping too much.
Mm-hmm.
And if a race of us fully evolved, I'll say the word evolved, who had become space travelers, say, I don't know, a million years ago or something. And they felt compassion and empathy on us, and they wanted to help us. And say they flew by, I don't know, 15, 20,000 years ago, something like that, something in that range. Or maybe they dropped by several times just to help where they could. Maybe small contact teams. I don't know. And actually, it does look that way to me. That it was small contact teams that no one ever saw, like a gigantic mothership. Nobody ever saw that.
Mm-hmm.
That the only moral, although I haven't worked out all the details, and bravo to you for saying first I would seek counsel. That's wise. To know that you're not wise is wisdom.
Yes.
So first thing you said was seek counsel. The second thing you said was go with consensus. The third thing you said was find a way to help without disrupting things. I mean, I think basically that's what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. And
So I think
there are
that's the very
problems.
invention of, or at least religion is a plausible solution to that.
Yeah, and there are problems with too much hand holding. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's there's examples within just parent-child relationships. Obviously, the parent has a lot more knowledge and is trying to impart that. Yeah, you can't make the child or the child like civilization. You can't make them too weak or dependent. But you do want to help them out. But I guess bigger picture is like, so how come it stopped happening? It seems like
What
there
stopped
there aren't
happening?
any more. Well, if religions were more of like an overt type of communication, and these extraterrestrials or angelic beings were coming down and interacting with people, at what
Mm-hmm.
point did that stop happening, and they transitioned into the like UFOs secretly harvesting samples and stuff.
Well, first of all, I'm not saying that UFOs are our angels, our ancestry, God, or heaven. I'm not saying that. Okay. But I see your example, and if I understand you correctly, I understand the question. And if I answer poorly, correct me. Okay. I think that this only happened once per civilization because that was needed. And I think it hasn't happened since. I mean, I can show you several North American Aboriginal tribes who said that people twice as big as they were showed up in costume, and they taught them what the costume was about, and the people still keep the costume, and they still have religious ceremonies based around costumes. But the people, the messengers, that's the best translation. It doesn't mean messenger. It means more like storyteller. But the messengers of those tribes were like, according to the people, they were like twice the height of the people, or somewhere around 8 feet tall. Now that's universal. Tribes who didn't know each other all said, 8 foot tall dude showed up, told me this stuff. Okay? And they don't swap pieces and parts of their religions. Each tribe has their own religion, and it's very, very specific to that tribe. So the most commonality that you'll get is like, say, between Zuni and Native American, between like Zuni and Hopi. It is kind of looks similar to the casual eye, but if you learned anything about the religion, they're completely different. But still, they have the 8 foot tall messengers.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a pretty easily common like thing that they could make up. Is, you know, if you're trying to think of something grand and mythological, you would think of bigger versions of yourself.
So you always go to Halloween dressed as a business person, ready to have a meeting?
I mean, I've seen business suited characters.
Yeah, but it'd have to be a specific person, like Steve Jobs or something.
Yeah.
I once saw, what was the guy that died? Worked for Macintosh, Apple, or whatever? Who was that guy?
Steve Jobs. Yeah.
Was it Steve Jobs that died? Okay, so I went to a Halloween party. There was a guy there, you know, in a turtleneck. He had white pancake makeup. He was carrying around an Apple cell phone or something like that. And he had a little, "Hi, my name's Steve."
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was dead Steve. But anyway, yeah. I mean, but it would have to be a particular recognizable character. You wouldn't like actually go to a Halloween party dressed for a business meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it doesn't fit in. It doesn't make any sense. And no more than you'd dress up as Dracula to go to a wedding. You know, so when we're trying to have an association with someone, we want to be acceptable. It doesn't make sense that if they wanted to be acceptable to the people, they looked harshly different from the people, but apparently they looked harshly different from the people. And it doesn't seem that in the story is that they just kind of come in and announced stuff and walked away. You know, and they never asked people if they cared about it. They never asked people if they liked it or anything. They just came, like, information vomit, walk. That's it. That's the whole story.
Yeah. So, how come it was just a one-time thing? Why
would you need it twice? Why would you need it twice?
We go to class every day. Like,
sure.
You can't just learn a subject one and done like that. I mean,
it depends on the topic.
Questions and extrapolations. And
I don't know. Maybe it's a moral question. Maybe it's if they lived here and stayed here and continued and just kept giving better and better definition, then maybe it would have messed things up. I can see how it could. I can imagine how it could mess things up. I mean, imagine this. Imagine an earth where everyone believes in God, and they know exactly when God's coming back, and they're just sitting there staring at their wristwatch. Imagine that world. That's a really super weird world. And besides, what would be the point of it?
Well, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily need it time-stamped, but wouldn't they want to at least check up on the progress? And
I'm not sure they haven't.
I mean, it seems like almost anything except for some perfect storm disaster would be better than what we have now, because there's so much confusion and so much disagreement over the religions that we do have.
Sure.
It seems like even the scantest amount of clarification would be some help.
Do you know that every religion says that eventually there'll be one religion?
Every religion says that?
Every religion says that.
I mean, I'm sure, yeah. I know Islam does.
Now they make the assumption that means their religion.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a matter of pride.
Yeah.
It does not say that this religion will become true worldwide. It doesn't say that. None of them do. It's an assumption of the practitioner. It's an assumption of the practitioner that they have the right religion.
Yeah. I mean, I know.
But the religion does not say that. Islam says that there will be one world religion. It does not say it's going to be Islam.
I think it does, actually.
No, it can't. That would be a lie. Now, there could be imams who said that. There could be other books that are supplemental that could say something like that, but that's the opinion of man.
I mean, the Quran does say something like they will fight until God's religion reigns supreme.
Yeah, well, yes, they will. Because the way they read it, they think they're in a holy war.
Mm-hmm.
So that prediction is accurate. Does that mean it's a suggestion? I think not. I think it's a prediction. You're going to misunderstand this, and you're going to do a bunch of stupid stuff until you get corrected. Could be read that way.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, violence is horrific.
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious to almost anyone, I think, unless they're trying to justify something, that to murder someone is wrong. So there's no such thing as a justifiable killing unless you're just talking about like self-defense, defense of a child, defense of someone disabled, something like that. And that's only if they're being aggressed on, someone's going to kill them and you have to stop them. You have no choice. That's the only, and in our courts, same thing. That's the only time murder is not murder. That's it. Self-defense. So we all naturally understand that killing a human being is wrong. How anyone can think that a God would recommend killing human beings makes no sense at all. But I don't believe that's actually what's being described.
If you believe that God is going to burn up anyone who doesn't have your religion, then that's pretty dehumanizing. And then
sure, it is. But my question is that how you look at the text, or is that what the text says?
Well, I know the Quran at least says that the disbelievers are the most hated by God.
Yeah, what's the word hate right there mean?
Hate?
Yeah, what's the word hate right there mean?
I assume it's intense dislike and rejection of.
No, it means they broke contract, so I break contract too. It's
okay.
You in English, it's probably closer to divorce. Okay, so it's like we had an agreement, you broke the agreement, I don't have to hold it either.
Well, I would argue that at least I have not made any agreement with Allah or
no, and you're not required to yet.
You're
not required to, it's fine.
So how come but I would be tossed in the fires of hell.
No, you not necessarily.
Under Islam.
Okay, let's say you're walking through your front yard, and you've walked through your front yard 1,000 times, and you know your front yard. But some mad crazy arborist while you're asleep one night, plants a tree in your front yard. Okay?
Yeah.
And you walk out the next morning and you run smack dab into that tree, forehead and all, face plant. Because you weren't expecting that tree. Like you didn't even see it because you so didn't expect it. Do you think that you personally would run your face into that tree a second time?
Depends. I've smacked the same pole a couple times, but I
That's
learned
not.
pretty quickly.
I mean immediately after.
Yeah. No.
Okay, you'd have to be nuts. There'd be something wrong with your brain for you to go, oh, there's no tree there, smash. Oh, there's no tree there, smash. Okay, so until the tree arrives, it's not even reasonable to say there's going to be a tree there someday. That's not reasonable. Okay, but if the tree appeared there overnight and you smacked your face against it, you wouldn't do it twice in a row.
Mm-hmm.
That is all that's being described in the text that is required of you, is that on the arrival of heaven, you go, oh, I get it. That's heaven. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think.
Well, it's the only thing that'd be reasonable.
Yeah, if I arrive at some kind of heaven when I'm dead, I'm like, okay.
I didn't say anything about you dying.
But...
I didn't say anything about you dying. I'm talking about our ancestors arriving here physically. That's what's being described. Despite what Christians might say, I can show it in the text like lots of places.
Like
it's not talking about some.
They called it Earth heaven?
What's that?
They called Earth heaven?
No, they said there'll always be a new heaven and a new earth. This is a cycle. We are an iteration of an earth with us on it. We are not the earth. We are an earth. It says there'll always be a new heaven and a new earth. That is, if an earth gets collected into heaven, the people of it, not the planet, they'll need space to live. So you got to build them a house. And then if you go to another one and you bring them into a heaven, they're going to need a house. But there's no end to the earths. That's what's actually being described. And I can get into details about it whenever you like, but it's a little bit off topic right now. But what's being described is an occurrence of humans on an earth being brought into an already established society. That's what's being described. It's not. There's no magic involved. There's no dimensional planes of existence being involved. Explained. Nothing like that. All that's Christian doctrinal view of the text. Which is why if you ask them to explain something like that, they'll dance around for a half an hour and say nothing, because they don't have an explanation for that.
Okay. Going back a little bit, here's the quote from the Quran, or one of them.
Mm-hmm.
It says, the Quran chapter 98, verse 7, the unbelievers among the people of the book and the pagans shall in the fires of hell abide forever. They are the vilest of all creatures.
Sure.
So, I mean, I would describe that as like an unreasonable hatred.
Oh, okay. So would you please put that in time frame for me?
Like what century?
Like when? No. When could the prophecy happen? That's a prophecy. It's not talking about
either at the time of death or at the time of like Armageddon.
Right. Okay. Has Armageddon happened?
No.
Okay. So then you're not forced to choose yet.
Okay.
I mean, right?
That's definitely how I would think a fair judge would say.
Well, either a God is a God and is fair and is wise and is loving, or it's not a God. Throw it away.
So, like the concept of an evil God would be incoherent?
Oh, that depends on how you're using the word God. I meant our ancestral father. Like I wouldn't, if my dad showed up from work every day and beat the crap out of me, I wouldn't have much love for him. However, my dad comes home from work every day and teaches me and holds me as I cry from my skinned knee. I can appreciate that guy. I would call him father. And if my dad was absentee dad, and he was, because he was in the Navy for 23 years, I would call him sperm donor, because that's what he was. I had no love for the man because he wasn't there to love me. So I definitely didn't call him a father. I could not possibly call him a God. So the position of God is not just birthright, it's also active. It's action. I can't see worshiping a God that does nothing, that doesn't love me, that doesn't help at any point. Like, why are you even worshiping something like that? I don't get it. So does the word God strictly apply to who the Christians would call Satan? Technically, yes. Our God? Well, no, not at all.
So if there was, I don't know, maybe even in a simulated world, if whatever created this universe had some sort of malicious intent,
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't call it some form of God. Because
Well,
I look at it
could be a God, but it can't be my God.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because
Okay.
like the way I use God is because it can cover any one of, Poseidon, Thor, whatever, and
Well, I'd love to go over the definitions of those words and those stories.
sure.
Poseidon isn't equal to Thor, but that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I would call them all gods.
fair enough. I mean, Christians use the word archangel, which could be easily interchanged with demigod.
Yeah.
It could. I mean, it's the same rank structure. It makes the same amount of sense. They just don't want to say that there are gods below gods. They just don't want to say that because that's not the way they look at it. But that's definitely how the Hindu look at it, which is fine.
The Greeks, though, would see, the higher gods. I think the Titans would kind of be on the same level, and then their demigods were kind of like half god, half human, half mortal.
That's right. Which I'm not troubleshooting you. I shouldn't have said you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. Is it kind of like the Nephilim? Yes, no. Yes, no. The evil demigods could be compared, and I think in one of the stories they do represent the same as the Bible would call Nephilim. Okay, but not in all cases is being half man and half God necessarily a bad thing, nor is it necessarily a physical thing. What I see in the story of the hero is the hero grows up, starts out pretty normal, and then goes through 7 trials, gathers 7 Dragon Balls, kills the 7-headed Hydra, etc., etc., gains the 7 stars in his right hand in the case of the Christ for the Bible, goes through a series of growth and becomes for like mental and emotional reasons, not for physical reasons.
Okay.
That's what I see anyway.
Let's see. So I guess going back, I mean, a lot of these people thought that the gods were involved in their daily lives. Do you think that was maybe reflective of possibly a higher being contacting them periodically, or do you think that still works with like the one-time contact model?
I think first of all that history gets lost in history, and it's hard for me to say something like that. That's the first thing I'd say. Like, disclaimer, I can't possibly know the answer to that question. My opinion. My opinion is, first of all, I need you to clarify if are you talking about human emotional and informational experience on a personal level, or are you talking about animism, things like Thor makes the lightning, and there was a lot of lightning today, so Thor was pissed off.
Kind of more towards the latter type of thing.
Okay.
Or tales like the Iliad, where the gods were seen as being directly in the battles themselves.
Right. Okay. Okay. So I call all of religion cryptic prophetic animism for a reason. That it's disguised, although there's enough value presupposed by some people to keep it around, not throw it away. But it's not obvious what it's talking about. And although practitioners have affected history over time, that doesn't mean they were right or that they understood it, but acted on what they thought it meant. Okay. And that it's prophetic, that none of it has happened. I personally do not believe that the Yellow Emperor of China was just like the smartest dude in the history of the planet, knew everything and gave awesome advice. I don't think that was a person. You know, I think that was a religious expression trying to teach them how to get along with each other. And they just called the character of it. The character of the story was called the Yellow Emperor. And over time, people came to believe it was a real person. But let's face it, Moses can't be that smart. You know, you can't just sit down and write the Old Testament. You can't be that smart an individual on this planet. It doesn't work. So I don't think that Thor existed in the past. I don't think that Buddha existed in the past. I think these are expressions that work for a certain society that is to be realized in the future. So I believe that Thor is a real thing. That hasn't happened, but the story is predictive, presented in a fairy tale fashion, using real places and real people of the times to make an example. So thereby animism. So cryptic prophetic animism is what I think all of them are, including Christianity.
So what would Thor be predicting?
What would Thor be predicting? Yeah. Well, you know the baseline story, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a good one to talk about. Would you tell me the baseline story of Thor?
Well, son of Odin, god of thunder, he went on all types of adventures. I'm not too in-depth familiar, although I've
Well, pick one that you know really, really well. Pick one you really know.
I wouldn't say I know it. I'm like, I know a lot about a little about Thor. There's that one story where he goes to the Giant's Hall and he has to drink the cup that was actually filled with the ocean, and the giant like tests his strength in all these different ways. That's the story that stands out most to me, I think. I think I'm actually more aware of a lot of the other gods' stories in the Norse mythology a little better.
Okay,
than Thor.
So if you were to describe the Norse people briefly, how would you express what their culture was like?
There was a tinge of war, battle, things like that, dying a noble death. But I think fundamentally they were like us. They liked their art and their clothing. And
so what would to a Norseman or Norse woman, what would be the expression of the perfect man?
Probably what we were talking about, a little dangerous, able to get some blood on his hands, but able to tame him enough to have a child and be loving to that child and defend his family and his village. And
Sure. Okay, so could you do the same, like kind of a brief story for Tibet?
I mean, I guess it would largely be the same. Most I know of Tibet is that they seceded from China and struggling with that.
But what does that society value in a perfect man?
Probably a lot of the same things, although maybe a little bit more of a Buddhist flavor, a little bit more.
You see what I'm saying? What I'm saying is the hero is perfect to the society.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go and you look at what the hero does and the story of the hero, it's always the same story. It's just presented slightly different in a way that society would think was cool.
Mm-hmm. The monomyth.
I mean, I could colloquially say right now, I am attempting to slay you.
Okay.
Okay, now, well, I could say that well, you're not my dragon, but anyway. I could say
my
that.
bearded dragon back here.
All right, cool. So in Christian context of the Bible, to be slain is to be overcome with emotion. To be slain in the spirit means to be overcome by the emotion of contact with God. Perceptual or real doesn't much matter. Okay? So this is why you'll see people like twitching in the floor in some Christian churches, because they are slain in the spirit. Okay? So that's textually correct to be able to say, I am slain in the spirit right now, and thereby I'm having an epileptic seizure, or however they act. That's pointless. It's aside from the point. So I can use the word slay to mean convince. And if you look in the actual definition of the word slay, it doesn't only mean kill, but it can be figurative or literal. And it could mean clap. Like sometimes where the original text said clap, when you read it in English, it says slay. Okay? So it just means to shock someone. To put them in a situation where they are shocked. That's what slay means. And we use that when we talk about football. The Cowboys slayed the Steelers last year. But no ambulance showed up. No rescue helicopters, and there was no blood like splattered everywhere on the field. That's not what slay means. So in a common usage sense and throughout the text, it's just not talking about violence whatsoever. So, for the Hebrew people, that worked. But for the Norse people, they don't expect someone to be so much of their idea of a hero is not a philosopher. But to the Tibetans, like your hero would be a philosopher. But if you look at what they actually did, then they all have the same story. Now, we call that the epic of the hero. And if you're reading of Jordan or listening to Jordan Peterson, he talks about that stuff. That it's a super standard story that appears in every society around the planet before people even met each other. And he's right. I'm just suggesting that it was handed to them instead of they made it up.
So, like with the Mayans, their gods wanted blood. So was that like part of the revelation?
Didn't we just talk about the sacrifice of flesh?
Yeah, but they took it very literally.
So Jews have been killing sheep for a really long time. What's your point?
Yeah. Well, it's just that in situations like that, it's obviously a lot better to have like clarity and more guidance than hiddenness.
I'd be inclined to agree with you from what I can see from the position I stand in. Now, I'm not certain that's true from outside of my position. I'm not certain. I can't say that because I can only see through my two eyes. I can't see from the position of angels looking down on this earth. I can't tell.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine what that would mean, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's entirely possible that the suffering that I've been through in my life is the best life possible and benefit me the most amount that I could benefit by this life. Which you get into Buddhism, path, and how you shouldn't disrupt someone else's path, but help them along their path, not disabling their path and things like that. I'm not certain that any amount of suffering I might have had didn't help me. I might not have liked it. In fact, I don't remember liking suffering, but that doesn't mean it didn't help me. I just can't say that right now.
Yeah. There's definitely that notion of, if everything's too easy, if your hand is being held through everything, you're going to be weak spiritually.
Right.
And
something else I noticed about that. 2 women who are just huge pregnant, say like 8 months, can be complete total strangers, walk up to each other in public and start talking about the problems and the strains of being pregnant at 8 months. And they're allowed to do that. And they both accept that it's totally valid. Or 2 soldiers, 2 retired Korean war vets, 2 present active military personnel, whatever. That anyone who goes through any kind of adversity is permission socially for relationship that's instantaneous without, making huge assumptions that no one would normally accept. 2 people side by side in hospital beds. They have permission to talk about exactly how many organs are messed up and in what way. Where in public, you would never do that.
That's an odd kind of feature of human socializing, is where, to some extent, people bond over what they like, shared interests and stuff, but you can really relate to someone on an immediate level if you're sharing some sort of suffering.
You see what I'm
hardship.
saying? Mm-hmm. I think this might be perfect for our nature, although we would call it imperfect.
Yes, but the more powerful the God, I think, the more responsibility they have to kind of minimize the super egregious suffering. Like, we need hardships in our lives to be healthy humans, but we don't need murder and rape. And
okay, so tell me, pick one of those.
I guess we'll just
which
go
one's
with
worse?
murder.
Murder's
worse. Yeah.
And arguably, it might be and it might not be. It's hard to say. At least for the person who's killed, it's done.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to argue that either one's worse than the other. I can't. But still, it's a topic. Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's say that there are on this planet 7.75 billion people, and that's maintained. And one of the reasons it's maintained is because of births, and one of the reasons that it just doesn't explode or collapse is because of murders. Okay. So let's say there's some kind of a balancing act between births and murders, which there obviously is. Okay. So there obviously is. It's part of the equation. And I'm not saying those are the only 2 factors.
But I think natural deaths are a lot, could balance it all on its own.
Maybe. Okay. But it's part of our present equation is my point.
Yeah.
There are murders.
Yeah. And there is something to the fact that, like, you need, from a objective meta perspective, death is necessary for this whole system to work.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
And as far as, like, to go back to evolution a little bit, you can't have evolution without death, obviously.
Right.
So.
Okay. So murders happen and births happen, and murder is wrong. So we would want for less murders. And if there were a benevolent God, it would interfere and make for less murders.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how many murders are possible on this planet every given moment?
Like sustainably, or
Well, just any given moment.
how many are possible? I don't know.
How about 50% of
If it,
adults?
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Because it takes somebody to kill the other person, or else it's not murder.
Mm-hmm.
And kids don't have usually the ability to murder someone, and old folks don't either. So I'm going to say normal functioning, healthy adults, 50%.
Yeah. Well, I
So,
was just
so
gonna say.
we could have 25% of the population murdered every few minutes, however long it takes to murder somebody. We could have
Yeah.
that. That's possible.
Yeah.
Okay, but we don't have that.
Yeah.
But it's possible.
I suppose. Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone went mad.
So yeah. Okay. So let's say of what's possible, is it less than what's possible?
Less likely.
No, is what's going on right now less than what is possible?
Less murders than what's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you know it isn't reduced right now?
Well, we can look at why people don't murder, I guess, or why people do murder.
Well, you would prefer that be even reduced more, but that's not the question. That's not what you proposed. And to be strictly accurate, you said that a God would make less murders, and I agree with you, but it's already less murders.
Or at least advocate.
Okay, well
Openly.
then openly advocate for less murders, which I think all religions do, including Islam, which even a lot of practitioners think is supposed to be violent. I don't, but anyway. And the Dalai Lama doesn't either, by the way. He agrees with me. Or I agree with him. He's older than I am. But what I'm saying is the numbers actually suggest it is reduced over what is plausible. Right now, it's already reduced.
Okay. So, like, what have you isolated the cause somehow?
Nope.
Okay.
No, I was just talking about your observation.
So how do you determine that that it was reduced?
No, that's not what I said. I said statistically it's plausible that it might be reduced right now. It could be higher. I'm just saying it's plausible that it could be higher than it is right now.
But we wouldn't know without knowing the cause, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think your logic is pretty darn solid, actually.
Okay. So I think, our societies, the violence rate has gone down for the most part, at least in the West.
Yeah, well, if you pick and choose where you look, yeah.
And I think a lot of that is attributable to just not just the culture, but also just the laws. But I mean, I guess laws are part of culture to some extent. And then there's also some statistics to suggest that the more devoutly religious some areas are, the more violent crime there is.
It depends on the religion, but yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, the more staunch a Jainist is, the less violent they are. So, I mean, if you get to pick your religion, you can say that statement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like there is much reduction done on the basis of at least a God. It seems like there's plenty of ability to use a religion to encourage murders, or at least some kind of like war.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, from my perspective, it seems like any progress we've made would be essentially basically through secularism or secular influence on a religious culture, whereas like
I'd be inclined to agree.
Jews were a much more warlike people.
Sure.
And it's not so much that they became secular; it's just that a lot of religions adopted secular
Yeah, from what I can
values.
tell, the ancient Jews were actually raiders. They weren't slaves.
Mhm.
And they were very violent raiders, is what they were. So they were essentially everything they accused the Philistines of being, they were,
Yep, that's
from what I can tell.
it seems like a pretty typical.
Yeah, sure, it's a common trope.
Yeah.
But that has absolutely nothing to do with the spiritual text and everything to do with the way they look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
They.
I'm often presented this argument. I'm sorry, I just want to make this real quick.
Yeah.
I'm often presented the argument that I could be reading it the way that I want to, because that's observably true of human beings. What if they're right that that's universally true of human beings? What if the Jews are reading the Jewish stuff wrong? And it's just the way they want to read it. What if Islam is reading Islam wrong? It's just the way they want to read it.
Yeah. Well, that is one of the main problems I have with the divine hiddenness.
I mean, my best accusation is my best defense.
Yeah, I mean, like the Jews felt justified to raid, whatever they wanted based on their religion.
Sure.
So in that sense, the murders would have gone up.
Yeah. Well, Joel Osteen is selling happy, happy, happy religion for money. That's not what the book's about. That's what he says the book's about.
Yeah, I mean, that's the selling point of every religion is, it's supposed to make you happy.
Not always. Southern Baptists are into self-persecution.
Yeah. But
you're guilty, you're going to hell, you better repent. Stuff like that.
At the end of that, you get heaven, though.
Oh, sure. But in the both of those religions, you get heaven.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
There's a balance between the carrot on the stick and just threatening you forward.
Right. But I think they're still just seeing it the way they want to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's I think, if nothing else, but even for pride, I think the gods would have wanted people to interpret their instructions correctly.
Why?
Why?
Yeah, why?
Well, even at the most shallow and selfish level of pride, like, why would they bother to give these people instructions if they weren't going to follow them?
Same reason you said you would help that earth.
Well,
not out of selfishness, not out of personal pride, but because you felt bad for them seeing what they were going to do.
But at that point, sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit. What?
I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Say it once more again. Sorry.
You were saying for pride of a god, they would want a correct interpretation from the start.
Yeah. So on the more moral, if you're going the more moral route, I would think that they would want their instructions to be followed even more to a T, because they really believe in it, and they're there to help. And you don't just have a kid and leave it with an instruction manual and hope it learns to read. You're involved in its life every day. Or at least,
right. Well, I don't think we're that innocent, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So in order for me to know that, it's going to require that I know everything about my own future. In order for me to say what's best for me, I would have to know everything that's ever going to happen to me. Because it's entirely possible that the best thing for me is for you to put a big gaping wound in my thigh that I have to sew up by myself. That might be the best thing for me, because maybe you could cut beside that vein in my thigh, which won't kill me, and then later by accident I'm gonna get sliced there, and it's on that vein, and I'm gonna die if I don't know how to sew it up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I can't predict a future car accident where I get ejected and a piece of glass slices my carotid artery or whatever.
Yeah.
I can't predict that. I'd have to know all things to know what is best for me. So when someone says it would be best for us if, I'd like to know how you know that. And I'm not picking on you. I'm saying anybody. People have said that to me before. Like
Yeah.
John Peterson, whom I love John Peterson, but he said to me, well, wouldn't it be a better earth if one less child had cancer? I said, well, it might be, but it might not be. I don't know. Do I feel sorry for the child who has cancer? Would I want to comfort them? Would I want them to be without the pain? Would I want them to be healthy? Would I want them to? Yes. But do I know that's the best situation, that they don't have cancer? How in the world would I know that?
Mm-hmm.
There's no way for me to know that.
Yeah, I mean, you could have like a final destination type of, like you try to intervene. It's a movie where people try to cheat death and it comes back
Oh,
their
okay.
own way.
I saw some of that. Okay.
Yeah, like you could try to intervene, try to help, and everything backfire, and it causes more damage than you ever intended or would have occurred if you had just let the situation alone. But unless you have perfect foreknowledge of everything, you can't. You can't be morally held responsible if things backfire, unless it's very predictable.
Right.
But I mean, you also can't. You just can't know unless you actually have perfect foreknowledge. You can only guess.
Yeah, that's right. So if I had perfect foreknowledge, then I'd have to know all things. If I knew all things, I would be God. And obviously, I don't know all things, and I'm not God. So when someone demands of me that I judge something like that, I don't think that's possible. It sounds good in theory. It sounds great. It sounds beautiful and loving and empathetic and considerate. And I love all those things. I think they're incredibly important. However, if someone's going to demand of me that I know something like that, I can't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get into moral dilemmas like the child on the railroad tracks, and on the other track there's 7 adults, but the kid's your kid, but you could save them, and all those complications. I just don't know the answer.
Yeah, but I mean, at some point that can be kind of paralyzing, because if you don't know and you can't be convinced like to do anything, then you just don't do anything, and the world passes you by. You could be making the wrong move, but at least you're making a move.
Well, there you go. You may have just explained all of society right there.
Well, it is something I've been a little perplexed about, is like, why do anything? Why do we choose to do anything? Why don't we just wait around and see what happens? But
I think if all religious texts were perfectly clear and not cryptic, that's exactly what we'd be doing. We'd all just be sitting around doing nothing, waiting for it to happen. Oh, I mean, we'd eat stuff. We'd do minimalist.
If we knew everything.
Yeah.
If we knew everything, we would just be like, well, I know what's going to happen. Like, do you know the comic Watchmen?
No, I don't think so.
There's a character in there, Dr. Manhattan. He's like a
the
god.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Manhattan. The blue guy.
Yeah. So he kind of just, he thinks he knows what's going to happen, so he just doesn't act on anything anymore. He's just observing it.
Yeah, that's the eventuality of realization, is that it doesn't matter if you do or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he could make a decision, but it's already been decided that he won't, so he just doesn't.
Right.
It's yeah. But yeah, that explains a lot about at least the social mind. Because a lot of animals, like my lizard behind me, he just sits here until he sees food or some kind of stimulus, but otherwise he just kind of stares out into space. Although I don't know, there is something else going on there. He went and he's swimming in his pool, or he's hanging out in the little pool. So I guess he's got some activity going on there.
I think that lizards are conscious at some levels. Whole different topic, but yeah. Maybe I don't understand what a lizard is, but I think it's still conscious at some level.
Yeah, in some way they're like robots, but there's a personality there too.
Mm-hmm. I think those are all of our favorite animals. They exemplify something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And dogs might be the most excellent example of that, and why we like dogs best, possibly. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that these moral questions and the idea of what is best for us right now makes it impossible eventually that you could have a description of the future given to us different peoples. Not that we're that different. Um, and you could give like full exposure and not ruin the whole experience. That's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's correct, it would explain a lot of what we see in I don't know, 22,000 some odd different Christian denominations, Islamic sects constantly being in war. They think they're supposed to go and kill folks. Jews that burn animal parts on metal surfaces in church. You know, just all kinds of crazy stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. A lot of it not very spiritually helpful. Just kind of
True story.
yeah, kind of there.
I really think the only thing that perhaps in adversity, some people fall together and some people fall apart.
Yeah.
And you don't see people like going out of the way and doing beautiful human. I mean, there's a reason there's a presidential citation and a Purple Heart and a Medal of Honor. Some idiotic kid went with a bunch of other idiotic kids and put themselves in a really bad situation, and they were told to do it. And someone did something totally crazy out of love for fellow man. And they get a huge honor, maybe a permanent honor, a place in the White House because they did something totally stupid out of love. So,
well, I mean, at least in the ideal case, it would be individually stupid, but smart on at least for the other people.
Sure.
For their benefit.
Yeah, but in a very, very selfish way, it's probably the dumbest thing they could have done. It worked really, really well to help others, but on a personal level, like yeah.
There's that duality of like sacrificing for the whole of
right.
Even in the human body, as it is one organism, but made up of lots of individuals, most of whom like die very rapidly and sacrifice themselves for you. Your immune system will your cells at least will commit suicide just to keep you healthy.
Oh yeah. They'll commit suicide, or they have assisted suicide in some cases.
Yeah.
Kind of cell euthanasia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cells will kill themselves if they're infected or damaged somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yes, it's a balance. Everything's a balance.
I believe it is, and I think the balance is quite delicate. Actually, I think it's much more delicate than the orbit of our moon around our planet, and helping with tides, and providing transfer of energy, and all of that sort of thing. I think it's much more delicate than that.
Mm-hmm. I think humans tend to swing from one extreme to the other, and we tend not to inhabit the area of balance too much. It's one of our
I think that
one of our
sentence structure
failings.
got me. Could you paraphrase that, please? I think I got lost in it. I'm pretty sure I don't understand.
Just as far as trying to live a balanced life, or things like politics, or I mean, even morality is, we tend to, we'll get on the right direction, and then we'll go too far, tend to swing too far on the pendulum, and then we'll swing all the way to the other side, trying to course correct.
Right.
It's always a hard thing for humans to do, and I think stories uniquely are one of those things that help us understand, how to balance those things in our lives. Because I can sit here and dryly be like, you must be balanced and never go too far on one side, and you're not going to get that without some sort of reference point, like
Mm-hmm.
like the dark side.
Yeah. I joke with people. I ask them to compare a nickel. You want to go ahead and give that a shot?
Compare a nickel
No. Compare a nickel.
to what?
Exactly. Yeah, you can't without something to compare it to.
Mm-hmm.
You have to at least compare it to another nickel.
Yeah.
But something.
Yeah, even the way language emerges in our brains is everything's a reference to something else. And yet somehow we arrive on some sort of concrete understanding, but it's always based on something else that we understand.
Yeah.
Remember, Sammy Jenkins agrees with me. He says humans are polarizing themselves. Yeah, I agree. Current political climate is very polarizing.
Okay, I'll talk about sex, drugs, rock and roll, and religion, but not politics.
Yeah,
That's off the table, man. We got to switch back.
I used to hate politics so much, and now I'm like a huge political junkie.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not judging you. I'm just saying it's not what I'm doing here.
Well, yeah. For me, it's not even about the politics. It's about observing that balance. As we're out of balance right now, and I'm interested in how are we going to come back to that place of balance and unity, and what knocked us off course. That's what I'm interested in.
Some interesting questions.
I don't care who, I don't care about a lot of the details, but anyway.
No, I think those are some relevant questions you have there. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So what are we doing? What are we doing? It feels like we should wrap it up because it feels like we've gone a good amount of time, have we not?
Yeah. Maybe answer some questions. I got another mention here.
Sure.
Iron Charioteer. Sorry?
Go ahead.
Oh. Iron Charioteer asks me, how did I get so knowledgeable in evolution and genetics? I'm just in school for molecular, cellular, and developmental biology is my major. And I mean, I guess along this topic, I've looked into creationism a lot. I debate a lot of creationists. Every time I debate, I learn so much, especially from like after researching after the debate. And I don't know. It's just an interest of mine, and I'm going to school for it. And yeah, just be interested.
Right on. I would address Sarah myself. I'm sorry, Sarah. You're my sister, and in certain levels, I love you. I'm trying to avoid politics. I apologize for that. Okay, if anyone has questions, specifically geared toward the specialty of myself or toward Snake was right. He just volunteered to submit himself to your scrutiny and questioning and interrogation. So take advantage of that if you would like. I volunteer for the same.
I will say I think I found my favorite comment of the night.
Which was
by Stupid Horror Energy says, I sucked cocks in hell and all I got was this t-shirt.
That's pretty amusing.
Yeah. I recognize his tagline or her tagline from something else.
Also, Sarah pees herself.
That's someone's name?
That's the same individual.
Sarah pees herself?
Sarah pees herself is Stupid Horror Energy is Sarah.
I think Sarah is pretty funny.
I think she's hilarious. She's a little bit shocking,
yeah.
But she's very smart and she's very funny.
Yeah. She also says, what do you think of Trump once again trying to get foreign dirt on political enemies?
Yep, that's a political thing.
Yeah.
It certainly is.
I think everyone does it. I don't know.
Possibly so. Sarah asks, what's your position on the afterlife? I guess we should both because it's open.
Yeah, you go first.
My position on the afterlife is that without flesh, you're dead. And what's being spoken of in every spiritual story I can find is restoration of flesh. So there's not an afterlife like the Christians describe it. That I don't see that in any text anywhere, including the Bible. And if a person live into end times and the arrival of heaven, they would ascend flesh and all. There is supposed to be some kind of a spirit and energy, not the soul, which means flesh, but some kind of spirit energy that is the essential you, that makes you different from your doppelgangers. And on average, there's 4 of you on this planet alive right now, but yet you're very different from all of them. And if there were 1 million, you'd probably still be different from all of them. So I would call that the spirit of Sarah. And that's my position on the afterlife, Snake.
I don't have much of a position because I just don't believe there is an afterlife. Let's see. I don't know. If anything, I think the closest thing would require a whole new field of physics that somehow like records your brain and then saves it after your death. But
I find it very interesting,
totally
since you brought up the human brain. I find it very interesting that under electric monitoring, displayed as a 3-dimensional image on a computer screen, that when you ask someone to reference God or reference themselves, it references the same part of the brain, but that part of the brain has no memory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about that for a half second.
Well,
it's not an information processing center, but it's originating from a part of the brain that doesn't even process information or have any memory.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not
I think
too versed in neurology.
I think that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Moving on, then we had from Iron Charioteer. Do you believe that each human has an essence, like the Gnostics think? I think that we have not measured all kinds of energy, and intrinsic to a living animal is a certain kind of energy, which would differentiate you from your doppelgangers. That's what I think. Do you have an opinion on that, sir?
I think that there is I'm going to say spiritual essence, but it's not a soul or a physical spirit of any kind. It's like the story that works for whatever you are, if that makes any sense. There is, a dog is a loving creature that's a social creature, and and we've been, I think, over this whole conversation have been touching on what is the essence of humanity, kind of thing, and it exists outside of us, and it's what makes us work the way that we do and what we are. I don't think that it is supernatural or anything, though.
I don't think it's supernatural. I think it's unmeasured. I think there can be no such thing as supernatural outside of nature. Stupid Horror Energy says, will we remember traumatizing events in the afterlife? Of course, we're looking at from our point of view, that we think of them as traumatizing right now. That doesn't necessarily mean from a different point of view, we'd still consider it traumatizing. We'd still cry about these things. So it doesn't require negation of memory to have a dismissal of mourning over an event. I would give for instance, if my mom is restored to heaven, although I dislike that my mom died some years ago, if she's restored and standing there right beside me, why would I cry over her death? For instance. Remember Sammy Jenkins says, what? 4 of us, but we are different? Yeah, there's only so many combinations of genetic material within the human race. There is 4 times as many people as genetic combinations. So there must be 4 of you on average.
Do you mean that look like you, or that look and think? And
I mean, genetically, your on-off switches, they have the same on-off switches on as you do.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be 4 of you. Statistically, there has to be. That's an average, though. There could be 8 of one and 1 of another. It's hard to say.
You probably don't know this, but there's a YouTube channel called Nerdrotic. I think Gary from Nerdrotic, he's your doppelganger.
Nerdrotic?
Nerdrotic, yeah.
And he and I are doppelgangers. How do you spell that? I have to go look at him, see if he looks exactly like me. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he reminds me of you. He's pretty much. It's a Nerdrotic. Nerdrotic.
Oh, like neurotic, only nerdrotic.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look for it. Thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. That'd be interesting. I've actually met Ocean Keltoy. Is my next eldest brothers. Those 2 are doppelgangers. I mean, they look different ages. They look exactly the same. I mean, precisely. Also, I met one of my best friend's doppelgangers, but my friend is a simple man from the Appalachian Mountains. And when I went up to talk to him 4 years after having not seen him, all of a sudden he was hyper intelligent and had an English accent. So there you go. Just was not the same guy. I mean, it was the spitting image. But we all kind of know this when you look at professional stunt doubles, that a high class, that's the wrong word, a high echelon actor might have their personal stunt double that looks like almost exactly like them. We all know about that.
Mm-hmm. Celebrity lookalikes and all that.
Yeah, celebrity lookalike. Yeah. It. Of course, that's they found them with the right, within about the same age, so it's close, but it's not perfect. If you eliminated the process of age, then you could find perfect matches, which is why when you get a DNA test, it'll say, oh, it's 99.9999. That's because it's not perfectly accurate. It's that 0.00000001 is accounting for your doppelgangers. That's why that's there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Obviously, a question for me. Do you agree that the Gospels were written after AD 70? I think as long as they're younger than the telescope, it's irrelevant to me personally. I think there are religions older than that and religions younger than that that are valid, and they're all telling the same story. So I think that the Christian view of the text is what they want to see. That's what I think.
Yeah, obviously, I agree that the Gospels were not contemporary to Jesus.
Well, I don't think Jesus has happened yet. I don't even think that part of it's accurate. I think it's strictly a prediction that Buddha is something of the future, Thor is something of the future, that Christ is something of the future. Those are different names. Like, for instance, if I told you I'm a man who wears many hats,
Mm-hmm.
um, it doesn't mean that I have, a bowler and a stovepipe and a baseball, and it doesn't mean that. What it means is I hold a lot of jobs. I have a lot of titles. That's what it means. The Bible says that the Christ wears many crowns. Well, I think there's only one way to interpret that. That and might be the reason, or I believe is the reason that the Buddhists say that other religions are totally valid, and expressions like that. I think they're all saying the same thing, all saying that the hero is a singular individual that they're all describing slightly differently in ways that are acceptable to their society.
Is this like a savior hero? Like
Oh, it's regular dude, no magic or anything like that, but he does really important stuff for the folks around him.
so like one guy who will save the whole world.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the certain peoples would call him Buddha. It's a singular individual. I think he would not perfectly fit the description of any of the heroes, but would generally fit the description of all the heroes.
Um, would it be more, someone who like blows up the Death Star, or someone who affects like a spiritual awakening, like saves
Well,
everyone by enlightening them or something like that,
isn't that one and the
or
same though?
both? Yeah, I mean, yeah,
I think that's one and the same. I mean, I
could
see
be.
what you're saying, why you said it that way, and I can respect that, but I think that's the same thing.
Yeah, I certainly think they could be related.
I mean, it doesn't matter if it was a photon missile or if it was hacking the mainframe that blew up the Death Star.
Mm-hmm.
As long as Luke Skywalker blows up the Death Star, he's the hero.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that can go on to inspire. Maybe
Okay,
it
so
was more.
Sarah, I'm going to need you to educate me. I'm going to need a definition of eschatology. Seems like Dr. Josh used that word the other day. Was that like fulfillment of prophecy? Is that what that meant? Was that the same word, or am I just confused? I'm probably confused. But I'd love a definition so I can understand the question.
Yeah.
Lest you forget, I'm 7 years old.
Google just says it's the part of theology concerned with death, judgment, and the final destiny of the soul of mankind.
Okay, so I was wrong. It's not the word Dr. Josh used. Um, I think that all real things could be measured. I think there's no such thing as supernatural. I think that we're physical ancestors of a physical people, and we're just genetically restricted while we're here. And they're going to undo what they did and release us genetically into our intended perfection. That is originally intended perfection. And that we will have flesh and like angels poop. Like the past Christ of the last cycle of an earth, he eats food and he has to wipe his butt. Like that.
So, the exact opposite of genetic entropy.
Yeah. Ungenetic entropy, genetic perfection.
I guess it's yeah, that's the end times. Eschatology is about the end times. So the end times for you wouldn't be so apocalyptic, or maybe, I mean, I guess it could come out
Here's what I think
through an
about that.
apocalyptic event.
Here's what I think. I think that I'm super stubborn. And I think most people are. So it takes the tree being planted in your front yard and you have to run your face right into it one time. And I'm sorry you had to smash your nose. I'm sorry. But you just got to smash your nose. That's what I think.
I'm with you.
And it's okay to have to smash your nose one time. That's fine. But if people continuously are willing or unable to see the tree, they're in denial of it when it's right there in their face, and they insist on 7.5 years of running their face into that same tree, then I think they're just never going to get it. There's a tree there. And that's sad. According to the Christian text, 31.5 thousand out of our present population are going to have a hard time accepting that the tree is right there, which is only 1 in 260, 64,031 to 1 ratio. So,
Wait, so is that
real good success rate.
Isn't that the number that the Jehovah's Witnesses use?
I don't know. The Jehovah's Witness use 144,000. They're quoting the first fruits, but if there's first fruits, there's got to be second fruits, or they're not first fruits, they're only fruits.
What was the one you were referring to?
In the book of Revelation, the last scene, the last thing that happens to people on the planet, and it kills 1/10 of them, and 1/10 of them is numbered as, it's one of the few math problems you can actually work in the whole text. It says 1/10 of them, and then 1/10 is 7,000, which makes it 70,000 if my math is correct. And then it says most repent. So you got 70,000 minus 7,000, which is 63,000. Then you have more than 50%. I'm going to say 50% because it's the highest possible number. 31.5 thousand people, and then most. And then, so I don't know how much most is. Less than 31.5 thousand out of the Earth's present population. So a really good success rate, which if there's a God, I'd expect a good success rate from a God.
Yeah.
Near 100%.
Yes, that is one thing that you would expect.
I'd like to, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if 7.75 billion souls were made to save 144,000, I'd say, wow, man, that's not an F. That's a really, really
1%.
bad F.
Yeah.
That's a super bad F.
You get a higher score just by writing random answers.
Yeah, exactly.
At least on a multiple choice.
Better than that guessing on multiple choice, yeah. Much better than that. Stupid Horror Energy writes, you can pick your nose, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your friend's nose. To disprove that, when I was in the military, we would. So you are wrong. You can pick your friend's nose, sometimes without permission if there's enough participants.
Yeah, I was about to say, there's people crazy enough out there who will disprove you.
Yeah, we did that.
Was that a prank or just
What's
boredom? Were you guys pranking each other or just bored out there?
In the military, you get very, very bored for extended periods of time. The motto of the Army is hurry up, then wait.
Yep.
So you spend most of your time waiting, actually. You rush to get there, and then you sit there and do nothing, and then they say things like, don't play cards.
And waiting for the most intense possible thing to happen.
Right, which means you need something that would distract you, and they say, nope, no distractions, be nervous instead. Thanks. That's so lovely of you, really.
Yeah.
Why didn't God stop the Holocaust? Well, I think we went into that in some depth before. I cannot personally say that the Holocaust overall can't be a good thing eventually. There was huge suffering. And I'm not going to start getting misty about it, but people died. People were hurt. It was horrible. People suffered. Some people didn't even get a quick death. Some people got a very, 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 very slow death.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying there.
I also
in terms
don't.
of like,
I'm sorry.
If we didn't have like our culture would be so different if we didn't have that impact and that cautionary tale almost. And it's pretty terrible that it had to happen in the first place for us to understand that it shouldn't happen.
Hmm.
So in that sense, it's kind of imparting good lessons on our culture. Of course, I would always, if I could snap my fingers and have it not happen, I mean, who could resist the temptation there? But
Yeah.
that is kind of one of the paradoxes of just life is
I have to say, when it comes to the Euthyphro dilemma, um, omnipotent being would, if possible, if capable, thereby either is incapable or doesn't care, suggests or demands that we are right about what is best. Well, I'd like to see someone prove that. I'd like to see someone definitively show that we are right about what is best. I'd like to see that. I don't think that's possible.
like some sort of objective morality is what you're talking
Right.
about.
I want proof of a secular, objective morality. That's right.
Okay.
You see how ridiculous it is if you state it that way.
Let's do that next time.
You'll be the first human on the earth to accomplish it. I'll be more than happy to hear it.
Yeah, I'll try. I mean, I've been working on at least an explanation for objective morality, because I'm one of those atheists who I reject subjective morality because it's just self refuting. So
Stupid horror energy. That would imply that God is not all powerful. No, that's incorrect. It would imply that God is not what you think he should be. It would imply that.
what the
Now it's
the,
entirely
the
possible.
problem of evil would imply that he's not all powerful.
Yeah, the Euthyphro dilemma, the whole thing right there. That's what she's actually saying. I mean, it's a summation without straw manning, I think.
Is that the one where that says if God has the power to stop all suffering and he doesn't, then why call him God, sort of thing?
It's in that neighborhood. I'll paraphrase. If a benevolent, omnipotent God exists, then that benevolent, omnipotent God would be required to, by its own personage, its own aspects, to decrease suffering or eliminate suffering on this earth. But that's making a huge assumption that suffering overall is not good for us. Okay, so it's us pushing our own will and wants onto the existence of God, which is a huge fallacy. That's just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
That assumes that we know all things and what the future requires of us and what preparation for that future would be. And so Euthyphro is basically claiming to be God. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah. I mean, I agree to an extent, but there is a balance point, you know.
Sure there is.
You have to allow some amount of struggle, but there's a point at which it becomes totally superfluous.
Yeah, it would. At some point it would be. Remember Sammy Jenkins, but you're assuming suffering is good for us. Good point. I'm not assuming suffering is good for us. I'm saying that my experiences of adversity have built relationships and brotherhood in my own life. And from my own experience, some amount of suffering has been good for me. That's what I said. I didn't say good for us universally. I'm suggesting that might be a plausible solution to the conundrum. I'm not saying it is a fact. So thereby, I'm not assuming. I'm talking about my personal experience, and I'm suggesting a plausible solution to the Euthyphro.
I think
of course,
that
it works in multiple earth. Without multiple earth, it doesn't work at all.
I think about it almost like what we were talking about earlier. You know, you could be, if you're paralyzed by indecision. A lot of our decisions are made out of avoiding suffering, or making things better.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I also look at it as kind of from the point of view of, I dabble in fiction a little bit, of like, if you're writing a character and they have nothing to struggle against, it's like, what is even the point? So, but of course, there's, even in fiction, there's superfluous suffering of just dragging your character through the mud over and over and over. It's just torture porn at that point. And in reality, if there was a god, it would have some responsibility to reduce the suffering, but I definitely agree that it would also have the responsibility to maintain some ability for the world to have obstacles for the people in it, or else they would just end up being the people from Wall-E, who are just just watching TV and drinking milkshakes all day.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want that for myself.
Yeah.
And besides that, chicks dig scars.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we should wrap this up. I'm getting to the point in my day where I probably should wrap this up. I've enjoyed it a lot. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, it's always a fun discussion.
Thank you. Thank
you.
I try to be provocative without being ridiculous. I try.
I like that.
I appreciate that about you as well. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Would you like to plug your channel and tell people what you're up to before we close?
Yeah, thanks for having me again. And I'm still working on the same thing I was working on last time we talked. I hopefully should be done tonight. So if anyone's interested, take a look at my channel. It'll be a long paleontology type of video. And I've been working a lot on it. So check it out. And yeah, just thanks for having me on.
All right, thank you. Peace and respect to you, sir. See yourself to the door. I guess I don't need to see you out.
Yeah.
Later. Thanks a lot.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.